Alright, it's party time on The Great Gatsby, and it's chapter 3. Nick is finally going to be able to meet Gatsby. He goes to one of his very famous parties, and immediately just looks like the introvert in the room. So far we've learned in the book that Nick isn't really a outgoing, kind of in-your-face guy. He's more of like a wallflower, or like a fly on the wall who just kind of sits back and observes all the other things that are going on. So Nick shows up at this party, and immediately he's just completely astounded by everything he sees around them. It's completely decorated, there's big buffet tables, there's a huge orchestra that's getting ready to play, and of course there are many celebrities. It's this point in the chapter where Nick also makes a very important discovery, which is that half the people that are at this party couldn't possibly have been invited by Gatsby. He even says, "I believe that on the first night I went to Gatsby's house, I was one of the few guests who had actually been invited." The important thing about this is that Gatsby doesn't know all of these people that are at his house. They're complete and utter strangers, which also says something about Gatsby's character. Is he really throwing these parties just to be nice? No, it's more that he lives a very lonely life. He doesn't have a wife, he doesn't have children, he doesn't have a family, he lives alone. Perhaps these parties speak to the fact that he feels very desolate in his life, so he uses these strangers and these party goers as a way to fill the void, which makes up for the lack of people that he actually has. So meanwhile, as Nick is wandering around this party being very awkward and, as I said before, introverted, he runs into Jordan Baker, who he just met before at Deezy's house for dinner. In this chapter, we kind of get this weird sense that Nick and Jordan are gonna become a thing, but they never actually do. So it's really just this giant mystery where you're like, are they together? Is this a couple kind of thing or not? Which kind of speaks to both of their characters, because the entire book, Nick never talks about anything else but the other people in his life. And the only thing we really know about Jordan is that she's stubborn and she really likes to play golf. So now it's pretty much Jordan and Nick against all these other crazy partygoers, and they meet some pretty weird people, like these two twins in yellow dresses who sound like they should be in The Shining, and three men called Mr. Mumble because it's all Nick can hear over the loud noise of the party. But these weird guests also play a significant point in the chapter, which might seem weird, but they do, because they allude to the fact that not many people know who Gatsby is. The only thing they really know is gossip that he killed a man or was a German spy during the war. As the party goes on, Jordan gets Nick to go inside with her, where they meet another man who's admiring the vast bookshelves that Gatsby has in his house. This to me seems like another representation of who Gatsby wants to pretend to be, because he has all these books, but there's no way he could possibly read them, just like there was no way that he could possibly know all the people he invited to his house. It's all part of this fake image that Gatsby is trying to create for himself. He is very concerned about other people's opinion. When Jordan and Nick go back outside, they sit next to a man at a table who seems to immediately recognize Nick from somewhere. He asks them if he fought during the war, which Nick had, and they begin a conversation. It isn't until Nick says, "And this man Gatsby sent over his chauffeur with an invitation," that it becomes clear the man he's speaking to is Gatsby. Here's this famous Gatsby character who tries so hard to make up a good image for himself, and his partygoers can't even recognize who he is. This is also the first time we hear the phrase "old sport," which is sort of like a little catchphrase that Gatsby says whenever he's talking to someone. Okay, so I'm going to take a break for a moment to talk about one little detail that I've noticed while reading this chapter. A couple times here, F. Scott Fitzgerald has mentioned the color of people's skin as being very tan and golden. This is a very important setting detail because it tells us that it takes place during the summer, but also that it's during the 1920s because everyone's tan, fit, and pretty happy. Jordan is also mentioned to be very golden, which alludes to the fact that she spends most of her time, if not all of it, on the golf course. Okay, so back to the plot. Towards the end of the party, Gatsby calls Jordan in to have a little chit-chat with her, which is pretty great because if you're going in to talk to Gatsby, you're like the queen of the party. When Jordan comes out at the very end of the party, she tells Nick that she has just heard the most amazing things and that it was simply amazing. As Nick returns home, he sees that there's a little scuffle outside of Gatsby's house where a car has crashed into the road. If you haven't read the whole book yet, I'm about to spoil it for you because in the few last chapters of the book, there's another car crash, which is quite similar to this one. But I won't go into too much detail because I'm sure someone else has a close read video about that and I don't want to steal their thunder. The very last few pages of this chapter are kind of weird because they make Nick seem out to be this kind of like weird woman stalker. And it just talks about how he feels really lonely but yet he loves New York. He talks about how he has these kind of woman issues, and then how he later has this sort of weird relationship with Jordan for the rest of the summer, where they go places and he discovers that the only real reason he likes her is because she's a liar. So maybe the only reason that Nick really likes Jordan is because it boosts his ego. In the very last sentence of the chapter, he says, "I am one of the few honest people I have ever known." So somehow dating a liar helps him to prove this about himself. Go figure. That's Great Gatsby, and that is chapter 3.